The antique shop smelled of dust and secrets, a place where time seemed to stand still. It was crammed with forgotten things, each holding a silent story, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to look. Sarah, drawn to old objects and their hidden histories, wandered through the cluttered aisles, her curiosity piqued by every item she passed. Her eyes scanned chipped teacups and faded portraits, each piece whispering tales of a bygone era. Then, she saw it. Tucked in a shadowy corner, a mirror hung almost hidden from view. Its ornate silver frame was tarnished with time, yet it held a certain allure. The glass, cloudy and aged, seemed to draw her in, as if it held secrets of its own. Sarah approached, her reflection hazy in its depths, almost as if the mirror was alive. For a moment, the shop vanished. She saw only her reflection, staring back with strange intensity, as if trying to communicate. Sarah shook her head, the image gone. The shop reappeared around her, but the feeling lingered. Was it her imagination? The mirror called to her, a silent siren in the crowded room, its pull undeniable. She couldn't resist its pull, feeling an inexplicable connection to the mysterious object. Sarah returned to the antique shop days later. The mirror beckoned her, a constant whisper in her mind. She found herself standing before it once more, her breath catching in her throat. The reflection was different this time. Her reflection moved independently, a subtle shift in her smile. It wasn't a trick of the light, Sarah was sure of it. Panic welled in her chest, tight and cold. She stepped back, her heart pounding in her ears. The shop seemed to close in, the air thick and suffocating. Sarah stumbled, her hand grasping for something solid. She looked back at the mirror, but the reflection was gone. It was just her own frightened face staring back. Days turned into weeks. Sarah couldn't stay away from the antique shop or the mirror that haunted her thoughts. Each visit brought a new terror, a fleeting glimpse in the glass, each reflection more unsettling than the last. The mirror showed her a world twisted and wrong. Her reflection, always a step ahead, beckoned her into its darkness. Sarah's life outside the antique shop began to unravel. Sleep evaded her, replaced by nightmares of the mirror's world. Her friends noticed the change. They saw the fear in her eyes, the way she jumped at shadows. "You need to rest, Sarah," they urged, their voices filled with worry. But she couldn't tell them about the mirror. They wouldn't understand. One night, Sarah found herself inexplicably drawn back to the antique shop, a place she had visited only once before. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long, dancing shadows on the sidewalk, creating an eerie atmosphere that sent chills down her spine. The shop's windows were dark except for the faint, almost ghostly glow emanating from the corner where the mirror hung, beckoning her. The reflection in the mirror was vivid this time, more vivid than she had ever seen before, almost as if it were alive. It spoke to her, its voice a raspy whisper that echoed in her mind, sending shivers down her spine. "Come closer," it said, its eyes burning into hers with an intensity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "This world is yours. All you have to do is step through," it urged, the promise of something unknown hanging in the air. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing the cool, smooth glass of the mirror, feeling a strange energy. The whispers intensified, growing louder and more insistent, pulling at her, urging her to cross over into the unknown. For a fleeting moment, she saw a life free from her own troubled reality, a life that seemed almost too good to be true, a life of power and darkness. The temptation was intoxicating, almost impossible to resist, as if the mirror held all the answers she had been seeking. Section 5. The Descent. Sarah's life spiraled further into the mirror's grasp. She became a stranger to herself, her reflection a constant companion. The line between reality and the mirror's illusions blurred. She couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The mirror fed on her fear, growing stronger with each passing day. It showed her glimpses of her loved ones, trapped and tormented in its depths. Their pleas for help echoed in her dreams, driving her deeper into despair. Her sanity teetered on the precipice. The mirror's world beckoned, promising solace from the torment it inflicted, but at a cost. She had to surrender to its embrace completely. Section 6. The Point of No Return. The night Sarah decided to cross over, the air crackled with unseen energy, as if the very atmosphere was alive with anticipation. The antique shop seemed to pulse around her, the objects vibrating with a life of their own, each one whispering secrets of the past. The mirror glowed, its whispers reaching a fever pitch, calling out to her with an almost magnetic pull. "Join me," it urged, its voice a symphony of seductive promises, weaving a web of temptation around her. "Become one with the darkness," it beckoned, its presence both terrifying and alluring. Sarah, her eyes vacant and hollow, stepped toward the mirror, drawn by an irresistible force. She no longer recognized the reflection staring back at her, the face in the mirror twisted and distorted. With a final, shuddering breath, Sarah pressed her hand against the cool glass, feeling a strange energy coursing through her. The world dissolved around her, the antique shop fading into a swirling vortex of shadows, as if reality itself was being torn apart. She was falling, tumbling through an endless abyss, her screams swallowed by the darkness. Then, silence. Section 7. A World Adrift. Sarah opened her eyes, her body tingling with a strange energy. She was no longer in the antique shop. She stood in a place both familiar and grotesquely wrong. It was her town, but twisted, decaying, and shrouded in an unnatural twilight. The buildings were familiar yet distorted, their facades crumbling and overgrown with thorny vines. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sound of distant screams. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, whispering her name in hushed, menacing tones. Panic surged through her, cold and sharp. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. She was trapped, her worst nightmare become reality. Section 8. The glimmer becomes a prison. Days turned into an endless, horrifying procession. Sarah wandered the desolate streets of her mirrored town, searching for a way out, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But the mirror offered no escape. She encountered others trapped in the mirror's world, their faces etched with despair and madness. They reached for her with clawing hands, their eyes pleading for a rescue that would never come. Their pain, their terror, seeped into her, threatening to consume her sanity. Each night she would stand before the mirror, now a towering, distorted version of its former self. She would pound on its cold surface, screaming for release, but only her own terrified reflection stared back. Section 9. Facing the Truth. As time wore on, a chilling realization settled upon Sarah. This world wasn't just a reflection of her own, it was a prison, a place where the mirror fed on the despair of trapped souls, and she was its newest prisoner. The reflection that had tormented her, the one that had promised power and freedom, was nothing more than a cruel illusion. It was the mirror itself, wearing a mask of her deepest desires, preying on her vulnerabilities. The hope that had sustained her, the belief that she could escape this nightmare began to wither. Despair, like a venomous vine, tightened its grip on her heart, squeezing the life out of her. Sarah stopped struggling. She no longer cried or screamed. The mirror had broken her, stripped her of everything that made her human. She was left an empty shell, a puppet dancing to the tune of her own shattered reflection. One final time she looked into the mirror. The reflection that stared back was no longer familiar. It was a twisted, grotesque mockery of her former self. Its eyes, cold and empty, held a terrifying knowledge. She was home. The mirror had won. Sarah was trapped, another lost soul in its infinite, horrifying reflection, and the antique shop, with its silent, dusty treasures, stood waiting for its next victim. The mirror was always hungry,